Power isn't a single, all-consuming machine that controls everything. It's a messy web of rules, budgets, contracts, and imperfect people. In this video, we break down Myth 14 with plain language and everyday examples, so it clicks without the conspiracy chase. You'll see how decisions actually get made, from local councils and small startups to consumer apps, and why that matters for what you experience daily. We'll keep it light with simple terms, real-life stories, and a touch of humor, so you can spot real influence without spiraling into fear. No magician's hat, no glow-in-the-dark puppets, just how power really works in the real world. By the end, you'll have a clearer map of who influences what they can and can't do, and a toolkit for thinking about power without the hype. Definition and scope of the myth. The myth paints intelligence agencies, big businesses, and governments as one mighty machine that can steer nearly every outcome. It treats these groups as if they share one global brain, able to pull the strings on laws, markets, news, and everyday choices with perfect coordination. In simple terms, it says everything from who gets hired to what you see online is controlled by a single, all-powerful force. That idea sounds tidy and dramatic, which is why it sticks. Defining the scope means asking what control would actually look like in practice. It implies that decisions are made in a single place and then rolled out everywhere without pushback. In real life, power is spread out among many players: lawmakers, courts, regulators, company boards, executives, engineers, activists, and everyday users. The myth glosses over the messy friction between these groups. Bargains, back-and-forth negotiations, competing interests, and gaps where no one has perfect grip. A new app, for example, can be shaped by designers, investors, users, and laws all at once. But no single entity dictates every outcome across all layers of society. The scope of influence also shifts by domain. In some areas, a government can set rules that reshape industries. In others, market competition and private contracts constrain what any one actor can do. People often feel the weight of big decisions when data and privacy are at stake, or when national security is cited as a reason for sweeping measures. But even there, enforcement depends on a web of actors: courts that interpret rules, independent watchdogs that spot abuse, and competing firms that challenge or reinforce policies. Everyday life shows this mix too. A trend in consumer products might move faster than the law, or a corporate policy change may be rolled back after public feedback. The myth makes it seem seamless. Reality is more a tangle of partial controls and shared responsibilities. Why this myth endures is practical. It offers a simple answer to complex questions and a ready-made villain or hero. The danger is that it narrows thinking to who controls everything instead of asking who actually has influence here and how do they interact. It also hands people a sense of helplessness, or on the flip side, a sense of omnipotence that isn't accurate. The truth is a landscape with many centers of power, each with limits and checks. Understanding that helps explain why policy changes, business practices, and online experiences feel orderly some days and chaotic on others. Plus, it leaves room for real progress when different actors negotiate, compromise, and work together rather than defaulting to a single master plan. The illusion of a single, all-powerful center. Power isn't a single switch you flip. It's a web of people, rules, budgets, and incentives that push outcomes in different directions. No one controls every part of it. The idea of a lone master overseeing everything is comforting, but it doesn't match how most systems actually work. Instead, power leaks through many channels at once, like light through a mesh curtain. When a policy or plan is born, it doesn't spring fully formed from one desk. A proposal moves through committees, lawyers, public interest groups, and media, then meets budget limits and legal checks. Funding decisions, timing, and the tolerance for risk all shape the final form. The result is a product of negotiations, compromises, and sometimes stubbornness that stubbornly persists even when circumstances change. The illusion of a single center fades as you watch the many hands that touch the process. In everyday life, the spread is easy to see. If a big platform updates a feature, engineers, product designers, customer feedback, and regulatory considerations all tug in different directions. If something goes wrong, responsibility splinters. The vendor, the service provider, the third-party contractor, and the end user all have a piece of the story. The same pattern shows up in markets, schools, hospitals, and neighborhoods, where decisions depend on complex interactions rather than a single decisive move. The single center illusion often takes hold because it's convenient to point to a single culprit or savior. It also fits neatly into stories we tell about power. But real influence looks more like a constellation than a throne room. Look for competing explanations, the way messages from different players diverge, and the checks and balances that limit what any one actor can do. Recognizing that helps you see the real mechanism at work. A network of constraints, incentives, and collaborations that shape outcomes more than any one center can. A little skepticism here goes a long way. And a dash of humor helps when the tension of complexity starts to feel overwhelming. You don't have to fear chaos to understand it. You just need to map the threads and see how they weave together. Limits imposed by law, institutions, and markets. Power is not limitless. Laws around privacy, data protection, safety, and fair competition carve out lines that intelligence agencies, corporations, and governments must respect. Courts, regulators, and lawmakers review actions and can stop or slow programs that seem to overstep. In daily life, this shows up as consent prompts, warrants, and rules against deceptive advertising. Oversight doesn't require drama to work. Calm audits and quiet fines can do the job. Independent institutions act as brakes. Auditors, inspectors, and review boards keep decisions honest. When a big merger comes up, competition authorities can question whether it will shrink choices and mute innovation across several sectors, not just one company. Regulators demand risk assessments, data privacy reviews, and transparent reporting. People notice when a company oversteps and regulators push back, sometimes with a quiet but firm reminder to fix things. Markets impose limits too. If customers can switch easily, firms must treat users well or risk losing them. Data portability, open standards, and easy switching give people real leverage. A poor policy may backfire as competitors or even new entrants grab market share. Your favorite app can't pretend it owns your digital life, and that joke sits well with most users. Put together, these forces create a real but imperfect system. Law, institutions, and markets push back from different angles and reinforce each other. Technology moves fast, and rules often trail behind, demanding clever compromises. Civil society, investigative journalism, and responsible leadership help close gaps and spotlight problems. Power remains restricted by these limits, and that's good news for everyday life. Evidence from history and contemporary examples. Evidence from history shows these structures can shape events, but they don't own every outcome. Checks exist. Two classic episodes illustrate the limits of control. Government secrecy clashing with investigative reporting, as seen in high-profile political scandals and the release of confidential documents like the Pentagon Papers, and the powerful role whistleblowers play in uncovering what was hidden. Public scrutiny matters. When secrets meet sunlight, policy, practice, and public trust shift in unpredictable ways. Recent revelations about mass surveillance show that governments can collect vast data, but the public response pushes for limits. Snowden's leaks highlighted the reach of intelligence programs and sparked debates that led to policy changes and court challenges. Public glare followed. Cambridge Analytica's data practices exposed how platforms can influence opinions, triggering tighter scrutiny and calls for new rules. Regulators and users pushed back. These events prove power exists, but not invisibility. Lobbying and campaign finance give industries a way to steer debates, even when the public disagrees. Follow the money, and you see networks that shape what's possible in law and regulation. Pharma, tech, and finance show this dynamic most of all, pressing on prices, data rules, and competition. Sometimes reforms happen. History also reminds us that antitrust actions against major players serve as checks, showing no single company or sector can smother every concern. Power is not limitless. Whistleblowers, journalists, courts, and informed citizens keep the balance in play. Public scrutiny and transparency can curb abuse, and laws can tighten oversight. People learn to protect privacy, demand accountability, and support media that can check power. There's no magic wand, but there are levers that shift outcomes when used collectively. The complex web of power, interdependence, and checks. Power across intelligence agencies, corporations, and governments isn't a single crown sitting on one head. It's a sprawling web where each actor depends on the others to get things done. Governments rely on private firms for technology, data handling, logistics, and services that keep public life moving. Corporations, meanwhile, lean on the state for clear rules, predictable markets, and protection of property and contracts. Intelligence work runs on networks of contractors, vendors, and policy levers that feed information and tools back to decision makers. That mix shows up in ordinary life too, through smartphones, internet services, and even the roads you drive on, all shaped by choices inside this web. Checks and balances come from many directions. Regulators, courts, and independent watchdogs review actions and sometimes curb power when rules are bent, like referees in a very messy board game. Shareholders and investors pressure companies to behave well. If they smell trouble, they push for disclosures and audits. Investigative journalism shines light on hidden dealings, prompting reforms or penalties. Public opinion in elections can shift policy, slowing or redirecting the flow of money and access. Annual reports, compliance programs, and routine audits provide trails that make it harder to pretend nothing happened. Interdependence can create friction. Lobbying and regulatory capture are real risks, where influence tries to tilt rules in favor of a narrow interest. Procurement processes and antitrust enforcement seek to keep markets competitive, forcing open competition instead of cozy partnerships. Data privacy rules attempt to give people control over their information, while governments rely on tech firms to implement them. Cross-border cooperation helps too, as data and money cross borders, so do investigations and harmonize standards. But compromises happen, and compromises can blur accountability in daily life. You may see it in a large merger proposal blocked or a data breach that leads to tougher privacy requirements. Understanding the web is practical. Notice how a new policy affects a startup you know or a service you use. Whistleblowers, leaks, and lawsuits remind us that nothing is just big, abstract power. Real people push back. Transparency reports from firms, independent audits, and public hearings are the teeth in this system. The web stays strong when information flows, when individuals can question, and when diverse voices keep the balance. It's clumsy, yes, and sometimes messy, but it works better than trusting one block to rule all. Reframing power, agency, reform, and accountability. Power isn't a single, all-seeing machine. It lives in networks, the people, rules, budgets, and incentives that shape decisions across every corner of life. That means real influence comes from many hands. Whistleblowers, frontline workers, journalists, and ordinary citizens push back when systems drift towards secrecy, profit, or harm. No single actor controls the timetable. Reframing power starts by recognizing how agency can arise in small acts, speaking up, sharing information, or refusing to participate before it becomes policy. Agency is the power of people to shape outcomes. A factory worker, a student group, or a neighborhood association can slow a decision that harms privacy or safety by asking pointed questions and insisting on practical safeguards. People act by speaking up, sharing data, or withdrawing support. Even small acts, like a team member challenging a flawed surveillance plan, can ripple into bigger reforms when others pay attention. Reform aims to put better rails around power. That includes clear rules, open testing of ideas, independent checks, and safeguards that endure beyond political cycles. Sunset clauses are one practical tool. Independent audits and public input on major questions help prevent drift from core values. In everyday life, reform shows up as a school budget review or a company inviting workers to weigh data practices. Accountability acts like a brake on power. A mix of regulators, courts, inspectors general, journalists, and independent auditors can catch abuse and correct course. Whistleblower protections and safe channels keep insiders honest. Public pressure matters, too. When a consumer group shines a light on hidden data practices, change becomes possible. Power pretends to be permanent. Accountability says otherwise. Not every reform sticks, but small, repeated checks add up, like sweeping a floor one pass at a time, with a little humor along the way. Myth 14 says intelligence agencies, corporations, and governments control everything. In reality, power isn't a single force pulling every string. These players do have influence, but they work inside laws, budgets, competition, and public scrutiny. They're big, sure, but that doesn't mean they're all powerful. Mistakes happen, plans get changed, and people push back when they don't like what they see. Small actions can matter. A consumer switches to a different product, a reporter uncovers a story, a neighbor shows up at a town hall. Think of everyday life. If a company tries to push a policy behind your back, people speak up and things can shift. If a government acts in a way that people don't consent to, elections, lawsuits, and protests can steer back. We're not helpless. There are channels to use, even if they aren't always loud or glamorous. And yes, even a single informed choice or a well-placed question can tip the scales a little. If this helped you feel less overwhelmed by headlines, you're not alone. If you enjoyed this closer look, hit like, subscribe, and drop a myth you want us to unpack next in the comments. We'll keep peeling back myths and showing practical, real-world angles you can use. Next time, we'll peek behind the curtain on more myths and talk about how to stay informed and involved, from local councils to the brands you encounter every day. Thanks for watching, and see you soon for more plain-spoken clarity.